Welcome to another episode of All Things Adrenal. Today, we're incredibly lucky to be joined by an amazing individual who has secondary adrenal insufficiency. During our last interview with Dr. Abraham, we discussed two of the most important hormones that the adrenal glands produce, cortisol and aldosterone. Cortisol metabolizes nutrients, modifies the body's response to inflammation, stimulates the liver to raise the blood sugar, and also helps to control the amount of water in the body. Aldosterone regulates salt and water levels, which affects blood volume and blood pressure. Both of these hormones are essential for your body to function. Primary adrenal insufficiency, or Addison's disease, is caused by the total or near total destruction of the adrenal glands and results in the severe deficiency of both cortisol and aldosterone. In contrast, secondary adrenal insufficiency is due to the absence of the normal stimulation to the adrenal cortex from a lack of ACTH. Essentially, things are lost in communication and results in a particular or total deficiency of cortisol, but often a normal or near normal production of aldosterone. Now that we have a bit of an understanding on the differences between primary and secondary, I'd love to introduce our guest, Hilary Hodge. Hilary has a BA in Spanish, Italian, and philosophy from Kenyon College and an MA in linguistics from the University of Florida. She's the director of the Angers Literary Festival and lives in the east of France with her husband and son. Hilary is currently writing The Art of Parenting While Sick, a guide for parents and other caregivers with chronic conditions. Her writing and classes provide parents with age-appropriate strategies, tools, and scripts for talking to their children about their illnesses, hospitalizations, medical emergencies, heritable conditions, and much more. As a mother with secondary adrenal insufficiency and severe asthma, Hilary draws on her own experience, as well as more than 150 hours of interviews with parents, child psychologists, teachers, genetic counselors, and medical professionals. She's worked as an author and editor for Oxford and Cambridge University presses, Pearson, and National Geographic. She's also an adult education expert and served for many years as the Associate Vice Chancellor of Adult Education for the City Colleges of Chicago. She is the patient co-chair of the severe asthma arm of the European Respiratory Society and leads support groups for Adrenal Insufficiency United. Without further ado, welcome Hilary.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me. This is very exciting to be in conversation with you today.
Well, we are so thrilled to talk about all of the things that you do and everything that you've been through, but I'd love if you could kind of start us off by sharing a bit about your diagnosis with secondary adrenal insufficiency.
Sure. So, like many people, and I think for a lot of the listeners, it was sudden and scary. I have had severe asthma for a long time. I was diagnosed with it first when I was 8, but it got a lot worse in my 30s. So I was on prednisone all the time, and really high doses, 40, 50 milligrams at a time for weeks or sometimes months on end. And so in 2019, I had just started to taper down from a really long course. I had a bad flare up and I had just come home from a trip to the Baltics. I had a lovely trip. But right when I got home, I started feeling really nauseous, weak, out of it, dizzy. And I listened to your story on the podcast of your time working in the retail shop and throwing up in the trash can. And I said, yep, that's pretty much exactly what my experience was like. I just started throwing up a lot. So we had a little tiny hospital in our town. I thought maybe I had picked something up on the trip. So I went over, I waited in the waiting room for 4 hours. They finally got me in the back. And I think you won't be surprised. I think a lot of people with adrenal sufficiency won't be surprised that the emergency personnel completely missed the signs that it was an adrenal crisis. I told them I was tapering down from prednisone and that I was, I threw up in the room in the sink, and the doctor said, here's a prescription to get your cortisol tested in the morning, and you might need to take hydrocortisone, so here's a prescription for that. And they discharged me, and I just knew that I knew. I mean, again, it was exactly like you said in your podcast. It was so meaningful to me to hear you describe your similar experience, because it was verbatim my own. I felt like I was dying. Part of me wanted to go back into the hospital, but I also knew that they had already missed it and they probably weren't going to treat it correctly. So I'm on my phone Googling, and that's when I first discovered what an adrenal crisis was. And I thought, oh my God, I think this is what I'm having. So my husband and I drove around. It was 10 o'clock at night. We were trying to find a pharmacy that was open, because I saw that the treatment was 100 milligrams of hydrocortisone. So I thought, okay, I'll just take a bunch of pills. So we finally found a pharmacy. The lady was pulling down the grate. I got out of the car and threw up. And so she opened it back up again. Thank God, she saved my life. I think she did. And she filled my prescription. I took 10 right away. Went home, felt terrible for the next couple days, like you do after an adrenal crisis. And so I got in to see an endocrinologist pretty quickly. But again, just like you, and I'm sure many, many, many people that get the wonderful resources that the NADF has, she said, here's your prescription for hydrocortisone. You're going to take it every day for the rest of your life. Here's a prescription for an emergency kit, and find a video on YouTube and you can watch it for how to learn how to use it. And that's it. But the thing is, when I got there and when I left, I saw that the waiting room was packed. I mean, I'm very empathetic to the fact that doctors just don't have time to give patients the education we need. And that's why foundations fill such a critical gap, because I mean, there's 9 million doctors and 18 million nurses around the world, but the World Health Organization estimates that we would need another 4 million just to meet our current needs. But the problem is, you've got all these baby boomer doctors retiring at the same time baby boomers are requiring a lot more care. So doctors are overworked. They're working 60, 80 hours a week. They're exhausted from patient quotas and paperwork and charting, so they don't have time to help us, and they're as frustrated with the system as we are. But at the end of the day, there is this huge gap, and that's why, again, I mean, foundations like yours and online communities have taught me 99% of how I manage my condition. It's how I learned how to split my doses to mimic the circadian rhythm. It's how I learned about updosing, just like you. I was not told that that your body would naturally make cortisol augment it if you were sick. And so you have to try to mimic that. I've learned about hormone supplementation, the possibility of my dream of having a pump someday, learning how to exercise, and for me, the importance of snacking before I exercise, because my blood sugar can really drop. Diet, because it can cause you, hydrocortisone. Doctors don't tell you this. They say, oh, it's a replacement dose, so you shouldn't gain weight. But I don't know why my adrenal disease weight loss group has 8,000 members if it doesn't cause weight gain, So I'm just saying the foundations and support groups just fill a critical gap. So yeah, that's the story of my diagnosis. My new normal is at 6 years later, basically to the day of when I had that crisis. And I'm still struggling. I'm still learning. I'm just getting over a bad virus. And even just the last couple nights, I've been experimenting with waking up in the middle of the night and taking just, 1 or 2 milligrams. So still learning.
Well, I'm so sorry that you had to go through, not a unique experience, because as you said, this is unfortunately something so many of us have had to go through, but I'm still so sorry you had to go through that. But I'm so glad for your diligent advocacy and research and trusting your gut on what to do, because really, when you get in that moment of like, I feel like I'm going to die, there really is no one else out there to help you. No one feels what you're feeling but you. So that is why it is so important to do that, research and advocacy and to explore. But it is so hard when you're not feeling well. So also major shout out to that pharmacy physician who opened that gate for you, because truly, who knows what would have happened if you hadn't got that. So you've gone through all of this, you're navigating, but at the same time, you're a parent. So, I mean, obviously this is later, like how long after you were diagnosed did you become a parent?
Well, that's a good question, because it was only a year later. And I think it can take you a while to really learn about this diagnosis. And doctors will say, oh, you should have no problem during pregnancy. Everything should be fine. And actually, my pregnancy was fine, but I guess I didn't really think about it too much before becoming a parent because I thought, okay, well, this is just a new thing I have. And I was diagnosed in 2019. I gave birth to my son at the end of 2020. I mean, I think it's impacted me as a parent. I would say the hardest thing, and I think you will be able to relate to this because I know that you have a couple conditions. It's juggling two conditions with all the chaos that comes with parenting. And I always tell people because, like 1 in 4 Americans, I have two chronic health conditions. This is very common, but I have, severe asthma and then adrenal insufficiency. And I feel sometimes like it's like having twin toddlers and one is tantruming, maybe the other's tantruming, sometimes they're both tantruming, and I'm taking care of a real toddler, and that's the hardest part, I think, is managing. Is trying to take care of myself while taking care of my son.
I always feel like, and I'm not a parent, but I always feel like with my body and multiple conditions, like I am this janky boat kind of falling apart, and there's all these different pieces that need maintenance and need fixing. But at the end of the day, adrenal insufficiency kind of is the jack of all trades captain, because everything else, pain, fatigue, whatever is going on, any other condition, it's going to impact the adrenal insufficiency and therefore send me potentially into a crisis, which can be fatal and life-threatening. So it's like this, yes, I do love the analogy of the two twin or like the two toddlers, because it is this juggling act, which can be completely draining. And that's me as not a parent. So as a parent, that's got to be a whole nother ballgame.
I think that when I am talking to my friends who don't have kids, one of the ways that I describe it is I say, this is about 60 hours a week that you just had free before that you're suddenly spending. And with small children, the thing is, it's pretty intensive 60 hours a week, getting dressed, fed, keeping them entertained. And one of the ways that I manage my conditions is to stay at home quite a bit. It just helps me minimize flare-ups and take care of myself. So that's one of the reasons that um, for the book that I'll get to, I guess, in a minute. But it was really important to me to come up with a long list of things to do from home for parenting from the couch, because I just think an awful lot of conditions require parents to stay home more than they'd like, and it's just so important to have ideas for things to do at home. So I don't do anything that crazy or that different than other parents, but maybe just a little more. We do a ton of arts and crafts and painting and drawing, and we have sticker books we make scenes. We practice handwriting. My son loves to practice writing words and letters and numbers right now. I absolutely adore apps that have like children's stories, because we can just cuddle and listen to those. So I've learned how to make the most of being at home a lot, but that can be a challenging aspect for sure.
I absolutely admire you for all of that. And prior to this life as a patient advocate for NADF, like I used to run a yoga-based preschool, and I had kids 18 months to 5 years old all day, every day. And I was diagnosed near the end of that career. And I found that the kids were actually so empathetic and so patient and so understanding, to see Miss Vanessa wearing a mask before face masks, popped up in 2020, or to see Miss Vanessa using a cane or having an ice pack, or she maybe can't pick up any of our friends today. And they were, they would ask about it, and I would be completely honest and, I just need a little extra support today. This is going to help my body. And they would just get it and be like, okay, how can I help you? And they were just so sometimes more understanding than I think adults are.
Absolutely. Kids are and they are also just very fascinated by bodies. They have a very frank curiosity about it and a lot of questions. They're not afraid to talk about it, and they don't necessarily get like we project that it might be stressful them to talk about it onto the children, but a lot of the time they are pretty mellow. And they're very accepting of what you tell them, and it's fantastic you had that experience and that you got to see that empathy. I talk to so many parents because I work with a lot of parents that say that their children are actually more empathetic than their peers and more likely to stand up to bullies because they've experienced firsthand that, their parent sometimes struggles and it changes how they develop. And I think it does make them develop empathy.
I also think that children in general, they're not, everyone is unique and different, but children a lot of the times aren't embarrassed or uncomfortable about things. And as adults in society, we put a lot of taboo and uncomfortable things about certain conversations, or, like you've said, peers and adults, sometimes they don't know how to talk to me. They get uncomfortable about things. So instead they ignore me, or they exclude me from conversations, or they don't know how to talk to me about the stuff that I'm going through. Whereas kids can just blatantly be like, why did you have that surgery? Oh, okay. And then they want to learn about it and talk to you about it. And it's not something that makes you less of a person. It's them just learning more about you and being, I don't know if it's curiosity or the fact that they're so fresh and wonderful. Obviously, I'm a big fan of kids sometimes over adult interactions. Okay, let me just dive in because I'm just so excited about everything that you're working on. Let's go back to, when did you feel like you specifically needed help as a parent who has chronic illnesses? When were you like, I need resources, and they weren't out there? When did you feel like you needed to make those? Like, how did that all come to light?
So when my son was about 2.5 years old, I had a pretty rough couple of years, and I think like a lot of mom or parents, I should say both parents, with young children, you catch every single virus, and when you have adrenal insufficiency, like you just said, it's like a double illness. So I was updosing and sick for basically 14 months straight. I mean, when he started daycare, we had gastro bugs, we had the flu, we had COVID, we had pink eye, I mean, you name it, we had it. And so between a couple asthma exacerbations and then two adrenal crises, I had been hospitalized, I think it was 5 or 6 times before he even turned 3. And because he was so small, it was not a big deal. We could just say, Mama's going to go see the doctor. But I was gardening. I just a very specific memory of when I had the idea for the book, because I was working in the garden and just feeling kind of stressed out, thinking, what am I going to tell him when he's older? How am I going to explain this to him in a way that's not scary? So I went online and I got onto a book site, and I figured I would find like a dozen books to choose from. I mean, there's hundreds of million people with chronic health conditions, and an awful lot of those are parents. And I mean, when I say I found nothing, I mean I found absolutely nothing. There were books on parenting with cancer, which, I mean, I can't even imagine how difficult that is. And I did buy a couple of those, but those obviously just have a very different and more narrow and specific focus. My book's really oriented toward people that have, maybe debilitating and unpredictable conditions, but who will probably have a normal lifespan if they're properly diagnosed and treated, but still have to deal with frequent hospitalizations, flare ups, medical emergencies. So I decided to write the book that I needed because I was just kind of shocked it didn't exist. And I just started reaching out to parents. And from the onset, I really wanted it to be for a very wide range of parents, basically anybody. I mean, the criteria that I came up with is very broad. It's, if you meet any of these criteria, you have a chronic condition that lasts a year or longer or is lifelong and requires ongoing medical attention, or maybe it interferes with your daily activities, or it causes ongoing symptoms and flare ups, or it's worsening over time. It might have been in remission, but it's come back. It might cause frequent and unpredictable hospitalizations, or like us, it might require you to take medicine or get a certain treatment like dialysis every day just to survive. So that meant that I was reaching out to parents who had anything from recurrent cancer to ALS to myasthenia gravis to Graves' disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, you name it. And what was incredible was that our lived experience is basically identical. Our symptoms and our medication are different, but their concerns when it came to parenting were word for word the same. And the conversations you and I are having, we could sub out a few words and it would fit totally in a lupus podcast or in another. I mean, it's just incredible how much people feel very isolated from their families and friends, struggle with partnership and co-parenting and worrying about being a burden. These big emotions of grief and guilt and shame and anger. I mean, it's all the same. And so I feel really lucky that I connected with so many parents and just had so many meaningful, really moving conversations. I talked to a lot of caretakers as well, people whose partners have chronic conditions, and that was fascinating to really get the opposite side of that. I talked to genetic counselors, family therapists, child life specialists, and my goal is just to help as many parents as possible, help them feel less alone. The book is filled with age appropriate tips and scripts, and every chapter begins with a story of a different parent with a different condition. I feel really good about it. I'm just wrapping it up. It's not done yet.
I am so excited to not only read it, but to share it, and for us all to I always feel like I'm trying to get more and more tools in my handbook. I want as many things at my fingertips and resources. And I'm going to be completely honest. I think this book is even great for people without children because I almost feel like it's going to be a gentleness and a guide on how to be gentle with yourself with this. You know, you're trying to parent and you're trying to take care of this living creature, but you also need to take care of yourself and nurture yourself. So I'm excited to read it as a patient and seeing how I can learn and nurture myself and grow and take care of myself as someone who's chronically ill as well. I know you've said it's got stories and it's got interviews, but what are some of the, I don't know, can you give just some like general things about what you cover?
Sure. So it's in four parts. The first is very specific to conversations with your children. So how to talk to them about a new diagnosis, flare-ups, a worsening one, surgeries, hospitalizations, medical emergencies, and diseases that run in the family. And then how to deal with if your child's behavior changes, how to respond if you see that they're upset. I have tips on creating guidelines for the family. So, what that might look like for adrenal insufficiency is to help your family understand that 70% of adrenal crises are caused by vomiting, diarrhea, flu, dehydration. So, they can just do really simple things around the house. They can wash their hands every time they come home. They can use, the family can always use separate cutting boards for meat and veggies to avoid any kind of food poisoning issues. Red for veggies, wood for meat, whatever. And then reminding kids, don't bring over your friends if they're sick, if they have a runny nose, or if they've been sick in the last couple of days. So every household might have slightly different guidelines. Like a parent who has anaphylactic allergies might have, absolutely no nuts ever in the house. But just this idea of brainstorming creatively guidelines to help you manage your condition. I have that chapter I mentioned with 100 plus activities for all ages, because obviously you're going to do different things with a 3-year-old than a teenager. And then I think the rest of the book, honestly, from that point on, is exactly what you just said. I think if you got to there's 14 chapters. I think 8 through 14, you could easily adopt as somebody that does not have children, because then I really start to move into how to build a support network, how to communicate with them, how to communicate with co-parents. And a lot of the parents I've talked to are solo parents, so that might also include ex-partners, or maybe they're co-parenting with a grandparent. Friends and family is a very important chapter to me, and I think I'm not alone in that, because I'm sure you have seen this trend as well. When you're on social media, you see millions of posts every day liked by millions of people, with the recurring theme of how isolating it is when your friends and family do not understand what you're going through. When they say, "I hope you feel better," when you have a lifelong condition. And so I felt that chapter in particular got really long, and I had to cut back. And I think if I ever write another book, it might really be about more geared toward anyone with a condition, not just parents, for that reason, because I just have so much to say about this. But I get into the fact that a lot of people really only have experience with temporary illnesses, and just have a really hard time grasping the long-term aspect, and in particular the fact that what they think of with illness, pink eyes, runny nose, is symptomatic of very mild things. I mean, our invisible illnesses are actually much scarier when we have problems with our organs. And just learning how to talk to people about that, how to use facts and statistics and metaphors to create common ground. I love what you said about the boat, because it's so funny that you said that, because I have this metaphor in there about, it's very similar. It's a way I describe myself to people, is I feel like I'm a house in a floodplain that just keeps getting flooded. And like over time, the wood is sort of, maybe curling and rotting a little bit. The paint's chipping off, but I can't live anywhere else. I mean, this is where I live.
Yeah.
And when it comes to facts, I think I just want to put this in here for anyone that's listening that maybe this would be useful for. I find that this resonates with people. I've tried out a few, but I find that when I tell people at 8 a.m., my cortisol is 5, when it should be at the very lowest 60. And my heart and liver cannot function without this hormone. That's why I have to supplement it artificially throughout the day, every day. And I just find that even people might know nothing about blood work, but just having that context of 5 and 60 seems to really resonate with people. So yeah, talk about common ground. I talk about how to have better conversations with your doctors, and in particular around pregnancy, fertility, childbirth. And then the last portion is really what you were talking about, dealing with these big emotions, therapy, how to create guardrails for participating in online support groups, and then planning for the future.
I love that it's so much. I feel like you've encompassed so many things, and you may not even realize it, but an overall theme seems to be out of creating this cushion, this safe bubble for you as an individual, as a parent, as someone with chronic illness, but also whom you invite to that, your children, your family, your partners, your friends, your community, and how to integrate them into this new chapter, I guess you'll say, of life. So I think this is going to be such a phenomenal tool for everybody. And when can we have it? When's it coming?
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I mean, I will say I feel a lot more mellow after working on it. It really helped me feel like a better parent and just relaxed about the future. Made me realize how anxious I had been before I'd really thought all of this through.
Okay, so then compare parenting prior to this and parenting now. I mean, I know you just kind of said you feel more relaxed, but like, what is the difference for you now that you have all this tools and things that you cultivated versus when you first had this new little baby and you were newly diagnosed? What is the contrast?
Well, I think, like a lot of people in the before picture, I had internalized this message that chronic illness is inherently scary and difficult and will be hard for kids, and it'll make them worried and it'll be hard on them. And then I talked to a ton of people that work directly with families who are in the hospital, who gave me a just fantastic, complete shift in worldview that, even something as grave as a hospitalization, you can plan for. You can talk to different family members, friends, neighbors, have a plan for what will happen if should this pop up, because as we know, adrenal crises are not something you can predict usually. But even if you're in the hospital and feeling terrible, you can still be an authoritative parent from the bed. You can still be loving and check in with your child when they come visit about, did they get their homework done? Did they have a good day? What did they have for dessert at lunch? And the parent or the person bringing them, again, it might be a family member or neighbor, can look at some photos of hospital equipment online with the child and say, this is what a, blood pressure, or this is a machine that checks blood pressure and heart rate. And then the child can spot that when they come to the room. And even with young kids, a lot of staff wears different color scrubs. So you can walk around and say, oh, the surgeons wear dark blue. Do you think that, do you see a surgeon? And I mean, it just completely shifted my worldview that you can make it part of the fabric of the family, even the most difficult times. And I talk to parents in my interviews who have adult children, which was really important to me to hear that everything had turned out fine. Everything was fine. They were so close to their children. They went through a lot growing up, but their kids were fine. I talked to a woman, Kisa, whose son went to medical school and is now a doctor because of what she, and her rheumatologist wrote, she has lupus, and her rheumatologist wrote his recommendation letter. So I don't know if that helps answer the before and after, but I just have a clear vision now that everything can be fine.
I love that for you. Sometimes it's hard to think about the future in general. Like a lot of time people ask me, oh, what are you doing this next year or next weekend? Honestly, it's so hard for me to, as an individual with chronic illness, chronic pain every day, it's so hard for me to think outside of, I just want to not have symptoms today. I just want to keep things at bay. So when you're able to have these, I guess, dream, I don't know what the proper vocabulary word is, but something that is tangible to look forward to or heard from a previous parent's experience, that you can have that in the future. That must be so, I don't know, I feel like that must be freeing to know that that's a possibility and likelihood.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so I know you've got this incredible project you're working on, but you do offer some more to parents and caregivers, don't you?
I do. I offer trainings and classes. I've been working with foundations to offer free trainings. I'm particularly passionate about medical emergencies just because, again, you and I have had this recurring theme, and I think it's really important that there is a gap in the care that patients get, an enormous gap. And one way that I feel like I can help that is to help patients come up with a plan for medical emergencies and hospitalizations. It's very specific, but I love doing it. So I work with lots of foundations doing that. I have 2 classes coming up that I am just offering through my website on how to talk to your child about your illness and top 10 tips for parenting from the couch. So one's in July, one's in September. And I am going to record some videos soon on the topics that I mentioned about the book and get those up.
Well, how can they, if someone wants to register for your class, how do they find it?
Sure. So my website is my name, Hilary Hodge. It's Hilary with one L, Hodge.net. And my Instagram, Hilary Hodge, is the same. And I've been starting to put up posts on really practical things for parents, like teaching their kids how to call 911 and how to talk to them about diseases that run in the family. So I'm trying to also put up resources online that people can find easily.
That's amazing. I feel like there's so many people that I'm excited to share this with already.
Thank you.
I stumbled upon, I found you after you did your, was a webinar through, was it Addison's UK?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You did a webinar there, and the whole time I was watching you, I was just smiling and just so eager. I was like, yes, somebody finally did this. Someone made this. Because like you said, there's, it's not for lack of experience. There's a lot of people who are parents with chronic illness, a lot of people with chronic illness all over the world. I really think a lot of it is, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm too tired to do that. I'm too tired to organize and put things together and put pen to paper and make something the way that you did. So I think anytime, it's an incredible feat to take on a project like this, to write for anyone. But I think anyone who is dealing with chronic illness and parenting at the same time, you get all the gold stars in my book, because that's just, I don't know how you do it. It's amazing. And I'm so excited.
I would say the same for you. I see this so often with so many of the parents I work with. You kind of get a lemon body and you turn it into lemonade. I mean, look what you're doing at the foundation. It's incredible. And this podcast is podcasts like these in general are critical for rare diseases because you do not hear the stories. And there are so many people in the world struggling with rare diseases. And there's, I think, 10,000, right, of people that have a couple 100,000 or less. And we do not hear those stories, but they're absolutely everywhere. So I think you're doing the same thing on your end.
Well, and that's what I love about social media and podcasts and videos and things like that. It allows so many of us who aren't really always able to participate or go out in the world physically leaving our home. It allows us to join the conversation. It allows us to connect. It allows us to feel like we're not alone. And it validates us because, you and I are just two individuals. I'm in Texas, you're all the way in France. And we have a similar lived experience that bonds us, that we've gone through. And we just get it. We understand what the other person has gone through, but without all the bells and whistles of being able to communicate and share our stories online, we wouldn't find each other and we'd be alone.
Absolutely. No, I marvel at how different everybody is in the online support groups that we're in, but how much people just connect over. I think that it's very difficult to understand what it's like to be dependent on a medicine every day for that if anything happened, if for whatever reason anything happened at all that you could not access your medicine, that you would die. I mean, that is a very specific experience. And I do see a lot of conversations about that in the various support groups I'm in. And just being able to talk to other people, that because that's sometimes might be difficult to talk to even your closest friends or your partner about. It's something that bonds us, people that have never met, that know nothing about each other, that will never meet, in such a deep way.
Well, and I think it's because a lot of people here, you get diagnosed, you get a medication, you take it, you live a normal life. That could be not further from the truth with, a lot of conditions, especially adrenal insufficiency. It is the most, at least that I've experienced out of all my conditions, the most minute to minute thing that I'm monitoring all day long. And it's not oh, I missed it a little bit, it'll be okay. It's, we know what it's like when we're low cortisol, when we're crashing. Our closest people or partners or family members know because they've physically seen it, but pretty much no one else really truly understands. And they just think, oh, you're sick, you take medicine, you're fine. Just take your medicine, you'll be fine.
I loved in your podcast where you were talking about how you tell people, you use diabetes as the analogy. I do the same thing because I feel like that is at least a way that people can start to grasp, oh, okay, if they don't take this, really bad things can happen. Their organs don't work. And then we can also get into the, like, it's, I like talking to people with diabetes because I can say, but we don't have anything to measure our blood sugar. And then they say, but how do you know when to augment and increase your dose? And you say, like, literally, I have to wait till I start feeling dizzy and kind of out of it, and and then I take more. It's yeah,
Yeah.
it's remarkable.
Yes. It's a trial and error, constant science experiment on yourself. And I do say, because I talk to new patients every single day who are newly diagnosed and they're just absolutely defeated. And I know exactly what that felt like in the beginning. That was just, you felt like you had to be an expert on your disease and you had to know everything and you had to perfect it or you were going to die. And it does feel that way and it can be very overwhelming, but you really do learn this new normal, this new routine, and you learn your signs and symptoms of when do I need that extra medication? Because yeah, we have nothing to gauge it on other than how we're feeling. And then yet we tend to gaslight ourselves and be like, well, maybe I'm just tired, or maybe it's just allergies, or maybe no, you have an organ in your body that's not working properly. And sometimes you need to compensate for it. That's the end of the
Mhm.
story.
Yeah, I'm really lucky that I found an endocrinologist who's making the fight and the case for me to maybe be one of the first people in France to get a pump.
Amazing.
So we'll see, because I would really like to feel the difference of what is it like to have it going throughout your bloodstream
Hmm.
a little bit all day every day, instead of, because that's another way I explain it to people too, that your body would naturally produce cortisol 40 plus times a day. Like when you try to take it 4 times a day, it just doesn't match up. So I'm curious. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for a pump. We'll see.
Well, keep me posted on that because that would be exciting to hear about.
You take pills? You're not on a pump?
I do. Yeah, I do 20 total. I broke it up 3 times a day, but I'm actually on team taking 2.5 in the middle of the night right now because I've been dealing with an insane insomnia bout for like a month now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to dose in the middle of the night to try to
Yeah.
tie me over.
Yeah. We could have a whole other podcast on that.
I know, and we probably will. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time and energies or anything else that you want to say or share about everything that you're working on or your story or anything else.
I think my biggest takeaway, my biggest message for anyone listening who's a parent is you're probably doing amazingly. I hear so much guilt from parents. They worry they can't keep up with their kids. They worry about the things they can't do. And I just tell them all the time, look at all the wonderful things you are doing. And exactly like we talked about, your kids might wind up for the better from this, more empathetic, more understanding of the fact that chronic illness happens. It's something you don't need to be apologetic for. It's just part of life. It doesn't have to be disruptive, and it can just be part of the fabric of everyday life. So that's my big message I'm always trying to get to parents. And I want to say too, thank you for all the amazing work you do at the foundation, because the paperwork that you provide newly diagnosed, but also people like me, it took me years to find some of that stuff. The great updosing guidelines you have, the translations, the fact that people can download those things before they travel. I think your and my stories are example of why emergency technicians need instructions, and we all needed them in our wallet. So thank you so much for the incredible work that you do, and your resources.
I know when I found NADF and I printed off all of those documents, I laminated them, I keep them in my bags, and all my medical professionals, I was like, you get a pair and you get a pair. Everyone knows about my medical stuff. Well, thank you so much, Hilary. It has been such a pleasure. I can't wait to see everything that you do, and you'll have to keep us posted on when everything comes out because we're all so excited to read your book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Adrenal Warriors. I'm your host, Vanessa O'Rourke, sending you all the spoons, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining in on another episode of All Things Adrenal. This episode is edited and produced by Magdalene Zinke. For more information on the National Adrenal Diseases Foundation, please visit nadf.us. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review to help others find out about all things adrenal. If you have a story you want to share or a question you'd like answered, reach out to NADF support at nadf.us.